This is the story of three babies, each born to a very different world. They struggle for survival alongside some of the most spectacular creatures of the sea. Their success gives hope for the future of a lovable but endangered species. For over 50 years, survival has captured spectacular images of the natural world. Now we draw on the very best footage from these wildlife classics to create new stories reflecting animal behaviour as it occurs in the wild. A mysterious forest of giant plants sways in an eerie twilight. As rich and diverse as the Amazon rainforest, these trees are anchored to the seabed of California. Welcome to the kelp forest. In this marine jungle, the inhabitants swim rather than climb through the canopy. Silhouetted against the sky is one of the kelp forest's most endearing inhabitants. Felina is just 2 weeks old. Riding her mother's stomach, the swell gently rocks her to sleep. But to keep up the milk supply, her mother must leave Felina to feed. These are sea otters, masters of the kelp forest. Though adults are expert divers, it's a skill that young pups need to learn. Baby otters have dense fur that keeps them safely bobbing at the surface like a cork. As her mother disappears into the depths below, the little female has to remain at the surface. Swimming down 30 feet or more, Mum's out of sight, and Felina begins to panic. She starts to paddle in search of her. But her mother soon hears Felina's shrill distress calls and comes to the rescue. The pup climbs onto her mother's chest as she's paddled back to the colony. For the next 6 months, mother and pup will be inseparable, not just for the free rides. She needs to teach her daughter how to find food and stay out of trouble. There is so much to learn, but by watching other adults, Felina soon starts to pick up tips. The adults roll themselves in kelp fronds, comfort blankets that will anchor them, preventing any unexpected drifts on the ocean currents. They keep their paws out of the water to help reduce heat loss. At 40 kilos, they are the smallest marine mammals, and staying warm is one of their biggest challenges. Grooming is vital, but most of their time is spent feeding, taking on calories that will maintain their body temperature despite the cold water. Every otter has its preferred menu, and in the kelp forest there is a well-stocked supermarket with every variety of food that a sea otter could desire. This one's fond of the small snails that feed on kelp fronds. It collects the tiny mollusks in its pouch-like armpit until it's got enough for a good meal. Then it surfaces to feed. And now, the trade secret. Felina needs to watch closely. Sea otters are one of the very few species in the world to use tools. They beat the shells against rock anvils that are skillfully balanced on their bellies. They bash until the mollusk's shell gives way, and the otter can reach the nutritious meat inside. An otter will munch its way through a third of its body weight in snails every day. Even underwater, the anvil can be used to release a reluctant limpet from its rocky home. There's so much to take in, but Felina's lucky. She has a mother to guide her, and over the coming months she'll be ready to face the challenges of the wild. But not all babies are so fortunate. Jody was born just days apart from Felina, but for some reason, she lost her mother. Luckily, she was found by an otter rescue centre, and now has a human foster parent, Julie. Jody lives in an alien environment. Soft white towels have replaced cold, clammy kelp leaves. And now milk comes in a bottle. For Julie, the challenges are huge. If she doesn't arm this young otter with all the skills her birth mother would teach her, then Jody can never be returned to the wild. One of the greatest hurdles that sea otters must overcome is the sea itself. California's sun-drenched shores are battered by colossal waves. Good for beach boys on their surfboards, but tough for a young otter. All the animals can do is ride it out and rely on their thick, air-trapping fur to keep them afloat. One false move can spell disaster. Perhaps Jody's mother fell victim to a similar storm. A sea otter's thick fur is vital to its survival in the cold waves. Now it's down to Jody's human mother to teach the pup the importance of personal hygiene. A sea otter's dense, fine hair traps a layer of air, helping it to keep buoyant and adding an insulating layer of warmth. And warmth is of vital importance to the third baby in our story. Lutra lives in Alaska, one of the harshest marine environments on Earth. In the shadows of glaciers, only the toughest survive. Today, the sea otter's greatest stronghold remains the ice-clad shores of southern Alaska. The sea doesn't get much colder than this, but still, little Lutra's fur keeps him warm as his mother carries him over the ice. The otter's fur is the densest on Earth. Just a square inch contains more hairs than a dog's entire body. The water is so cold that the otters even haul out on icebergs to warm up. Males and females rarely mix, and adult males tend to live alone. But adolescent otters still enjoy each other's company. Lutra is happy to stay close to his mother. Instead of weaving through branches of kelp, he has to learn to navigate around floating ice. But below the freezing surface, life goes on. Between the foraging trips, the females and their young gather in river mouths where there's less ice. These floating social clubs are known as rafts. As usual, the main preoccupation here is grooming. Their fur is like a survival suit, and in these icy waters, it's the key to life itself. Lutra's clan lives in the shadow of an ancient glacier, a huge, moving mountain of ice. A relic of the Ice Age, this 10-story glacier periodically sheds ice into the sea in a process called calving. Harbour seals live alongside the otters, and both species have learned to recognize the sounds of cracking ice and move well clear of the dangers. His mother paddles Lutra away as a wall of ice splinters free. Their life suits will keep them afloat as they ride out the localized tsunami. The seals let it rock their boat. Sometimes it's just easier to go with the flow. Lutra's mother finds calmer waters with other otter cubs, where he can rest out of the water and on her warm stomach. Lutra's freezing world is a huge contrast to the warm Californian coast, where Felina is growing up amongst the kelp forests. By watching the adults and shadowing her mother, Felina gradually learns to find food beneath the waves. The favourite food for otters is the now endangered abalone. These slow-moving shellfish were once very popular in seafood restaurants, and too many were harvested. Felina's mother must dive deep and explore the tightest crevices to find them. Astonishingly, she can hold her breath for 5 minutes to reach the seafloor. An adult otter needs 20 pounds of food a day to keep itself centrally heated. Even off California, the sea can be chilly. Sea otters are not the tidiest of feeders, but crumbs that fall from their table won't go to waste. Scavengers lurk in the kelp fronds below, more than happy to clean up. While some fish aren't afraid to make the most of messy neighbours, others do their best to keep a low profile. The horned shark is restricted to the Californian coast. Preferring to feed at night, it spends its days crammed into whatever shelter it can find. But at this time of year, the meter-long sharks rise early. It's the breeding season. Horned sharks have small territories where they rest and feed, but now they must go in search of a mate. There are favoured rendezvous sites where males and females can meet. The females lie on the bottom as the males pass over. Once he's chosen a mate, things get a bit frisky. The only way to get a female horn shark in the mood is to give her a love bite. That's all it takes. A brief shake-up and the job's done. The female will produce eggs in a few weeks, but after mating, the priority is to find food. Horn sharks mostly feed on crabs or sea urchins, just like the sea otters. A trail of empty urchin shells means that Felina's mother must keep on searching. The longest dives take her an extraordinary 300 feet beneath the surface. Gulls are the jackals of the sea, always looking for scraps to snatch. Felina must get used to the noisy neighbours. Whenever she feeds, inevitably seabirds will be nearby. Wading birds also look out for shellfish, but they prefer to paddle or hunt on shore instead of swim. Seals and cormorants bask on the rocks, but before long they'll slip into the kelp forests to feed alongside the otters. It's a daunting prospect for Felina to conquer these depths, but with her mother's guidance, she'll get there. Back at the Sea Otter Rescue Centre, Jody's mother is human, but must still teach Jody the skills she needs to survive in the wild. Every day, Jody is groomed to encourage her to look after the thick fur that will warm her body in the sea. Julie has introduced kelp and other objects from the wild to get the little otter used to them. She even uses a rock anvil to show Jody how to crack the mollusk diet. As part of her training, a game of hide and seek helps Jody associate unappetizing shells with juicy meals inside. The marine menu that will be on offer once she's back in the kelp will be huge, so she needs to learn what's what. The wealth of small marine animals supports a food chain with giants at its summit. The smallest of whales, the harbour porpoise, often come right into the shore, feeding close to the otters. Their cousins, dolphins, are far more energetic and social, racing along the coast in herds that might include hundreds of individuals. But the further from shore animals are, it seems the bigger they get. Pilot whales are large black dolphins that live in close family groups. And there are filter-feeding baleen whales. The minke can reach 10 meters in length. But it's dwarfed by enormous fin whales, the second largest creatures on Earth. Of all the whales, none are as conspicuous as the humpbacks. The humpbacks are more active at the surface. And the great slaps can even be heard by the otters back at the coast. Large whales are considered gentle giants. They mostly feed on small prey, but not all are as benign. Killer whales, or orca, are big and bold members of the dolphin family. Like wolves of the sea, they live and hunt in packs. This time, a shoal of fish is their target. With skillful coordination, they round up the frightened fish, herding them into a tight ball. They pound the ball with powerful tails, leaving a trail of stunned fish in their wake that the orcas consume at their leisure. But orca have varied diets. Some prefer fish, while others prefer to feed on mammal prey. One of the greatest challenges for any young otter is learning to recognize their deadly neighbors. Killer whales on the prowl could become a real threat to Felina. Predators lurk in the deep. Killer whales patrol the edge of the kelp forest. Historically, they have shown little interest in sea otters, but in recent years, this has changed. In some areas, overfishing by man has caused seal numbers to plummet as their food disappears, meaning that the killer whales are also forced to switch from their natural prey, seals, and instead start hunting otters. The populations of otters most affected by whale attacks are those in the far north. But for now, Lutra and his colony are making the most of a brief summer, hauling out like seals to bask in the sun. In the sheltered coves nearby, the harbour seal's mating season is underway. A male tries to catch the eye of the females, basking on the rocks, though they don't seem too impressed. He's agile and persistent, though. Most male harbour seals will be faithful to just one or two females during the breeding season. Flipper slapping and blowing bubbles. Finally, a headstand. That got the girls looking. Seals form colonies here because the cool, shallow water is nutrient-rich and teeming with fish. The seals spend 85% of their day underwater, plundering the riches. Thanks to the abundance, many animals call this home. Lutra has a big family. While Californian sea otters are found in small groups, the Alaskan animals gather in the hundreds to relax in the sun. Only females and their young share this colony. The males tend to hang out in areas offshore. The key to this wealth of otters lies in the muddy seabed, where clams, mussels, and other shellfish thrive. The rich waters attract even larger feeders. This colossal grey whale is longer than a bus and has just travelled 5,000 miles from the balmy seas of Mexico to get stuck into a mud bath. It scoops up mud and pumps the water and silt out through sieve-like baleen plates. It's left with a mouthful of its favourite food, fly-sized crabs called amphipods. A bird's-eye view shows the series of muddy clouds left in the wake of a hungry whale. The whales won't be able to feed in the less productive waters to the south, while they'll spend the winter, so they gorge themselves now, eating a ton of food a day. Luckily, they don't have much appetite for large shellfish, so travelling in the whale's wake, Lutra and his relatives are able to gather plenty of food. But both the grey whales and otters must be careful. Marine mammals with their nutritious blubber attract mammal hunters. The killer whales are back. This time it's a pod of walrus under attack. Like otters, these colossal seals haul out of the sea to sunbathe, but they always have to return to the water to feed. They share the sea otter's love of mussels and clams and rummage in the mud, squirting jets of water through their rubbery lips to stir up the silt. They feel out the prey with their whiskers. They dive deep, but leaving the safety of the shore puts them in the killer whale's firing line. Stealthily, they slip into the bay. They have separated a small group of walrus from the main herd. The chase begins. Adults carry their calves on their backs to try and keep them away from the killers. The orcas drive the frightened walrus back and forth, making them continually dive until they eventually begin to tire. Once they are at the surface, the whales thrash with their tails to try and knock out their victim. Against this gang, the walrus is powerless. But its death will feed the whale family, including their young calves. Lutra has stayed in the shallows to feed. Unlike otters in California, which tend to concentrate on a particular food, these cold water cousins will eat what they can. The mud makes finding shellfish hard work, so it pays to have a varied diet. Then, belly full, it's back to the beach to try and rub the soil from their survival suits. It's a big day for Jody. She's experiencing fresh air and salt water for the first time since her rescue. It's a big and intimidating step for a little otter, so she's reluctant to leave her foster mother's side. The pool is filled every high tide with seawater, so it's a safe way to experience life in the wild. First step is to prepare the dive suit. Like a diver getting their dry suit zipped up and watertight, Jody must fluff up her fur to build a good air layer. The constant squeals are a mixture of demands for food and the need of reassurance. Even as adults, the otters use shrill voices to keep their companions together. After a bit of coaxing, they take a dip. Julie blows into Jody's mouth, a typical otter greeting. Julie leads the way, but Jody's fuzzy coat gives her extra buoyancy, like a life jacket. Try as she might, she can't follow her mum. Gradually, she will master the art, and as she does, take another step towards a return to the wild. Not far off the same shoreline, Felina is feeding alongside her mother. She's over 5 months old and gradually being weaned off milk. Now she's begging for shellfish from her mum. They are starting to dive together, and before long Felina will be picking mollusks herself, ready to explore the kelp forest that is to be her home. Luckily, Felina still has her mother to protect her, but it's not forever. And Jody won't always have her human mum around either. Julie knows Jody must become independent if she is to survive. She begins to take her orphan diving into the kelp forest near the beach, a first taste of freedom. It still takes a lot of effort to overcome the buoyancy of her bathing suit, but she's starting to get the hang of it. Jody wants to investigate everything. Otter pups usually learn to stick to their mother's favourite foods, but Julie makes sure that Jody's shown every possible meal, from abalone on the seabed, which involve Jody taking deeper and deeper dives, to the tiny winkles on kelp leaves, which can be leisurely harvested at the surface. For the first time in her life, Jody is even diving and looking for food on her own. If she can crack it, she'll finally be ready to return to the open seas. Several weeks have passed since the horned sharks mated, and now, amid the rocky sea floor, the female is laying her peculiar eggs. She'll produce about 20 of these 5-inch long eggs, all perfectly camouflaged to blend in with the kelp. But despite her best efforts, not all of the babies will hatch out. Unlikely predators patrol the rocks. Double trouble, a pair of whelks. These predatory snails have discovered an egg. One probes its prey with an extendable proboscis. This flexible trunk is tipped with a tough file that can bore through the egg case. Once it's chewed its way through the shell, it can suck out and digest the shark embryo. The kelp forest is a dangerous place for any young animal. Back out in the surf, and Felina's life is about to change forever. It's the mating season, and her mum is playing the dating game. A large mature male is showing an interest, and suddenly Felina's alone. Otters typically end their parental duties in this abrupt fashion. Felina is on her own now. When females are in season, males can pick up their scent from over a mile away. There's no gentle courting here. Sea otters like it rough. They roll through the kelp in their passionate embrace. Strangely, it's believed that female otters need a bit of rough treatment to release hormones that will help them conceive. To get her in the mood, the male must bite her nose. Tough love. After a few days of mating, the female escapes to the shore to nurse her tender nose. It will recover, but all females have scarred noses thanks to their rough mating rituals. Luckily, Felina still has a couple of years before she has to tackle the males, and makes the most of a leftover abalone. She's getting pretty good at finding food for herself, and dives again to feed. It turns out it's not just her mother in the mood for making babies. Her lunch is added as well. A female abalone pumps millions of tiny eggs into the ocean to be fertilized by the male's sperm. the tiny eggs will drift with the sea currents, becoming part of the rich soup of plankton. Felina continues to forage, unaware of large animals that have drawn in to feed. This is one of the largest sharks on Earth. Its mouth is big enough to swallow a child whole. But it won't. This is a basking shark, a harmless filter feeder. It sustains its 30-foot body by sieving tiny zooplankton from the sea. Its diet is made up of baby crabs, lobsters, fish eggs, infant jellies, and even shellfish eggs like the abalone. Felina can ignore the giant and continues her search for shellfish. The young otter suddenly seems to have lots of new friends. Beady-eyed gulls are looking for dropped crumbs, but the cormorant prefers a more hands-on approach. When Felina dives, the bird follows. No other animals turn over rocks on the seabed like this. The bird's keen to take advantage of Felina's muscle. The otters roll rocks in search of octopus, crabs, and shellfish that could be hiding underneath. The cormorant stays close by in case any small fish are flushed out in the process. Eventually, the cormorant runs out of air, but Felina continues her search. Directly beneath her, a new life emerges. The surviving horn shark eggs are finally ready to hatch. The tiny baby fights its way free of the rubbery shell and enters the dark and dangerous world of the reef. A perfect miniature of his parents, he's able to feed himself, swim, and instinctively knows to look for shelter. The baby sharks seek others of their kind, forming creches that can hide in the rocks together. Baby sharks get a lot of unwanted attention from the resident sea lions. It's not a good idea to get caught out in the open. Unlike the adults that prefer the reef, young sharks move out onto flat sand beds in the shallows, where they find it easier to collect soft-bodied prey like worms that burrow in the mud. It's escaped as sea lions and finds a good spot, but it's not out of trouble. It was swallowed by a well-camouflaged angel shark, but quickly spat out again thanks to the sharp spine on its back, making it a tough meal to swallow. It disappears over the sand and away from the dangers of the kelp. Felina will spend her whole life in this small patch of kelp forest, and she will slowly learn where to find food. Her diving finally pays off, a rather prickly meal. She's clearly picked up a few tips from her mother and expertly handles the sea urchin's spiny shell. She'll suck out the meaty body through the less protected underside. This is one otter that knows how to look after herself. But for another young female, a future is less assured. Jody needs to prove herself. Her foster mother has done a good job, but can it ever compare to the teachings of a natural mother? Is Jody ready to tackle the challenges of life in the wild? Swimming lessons are being taken up a notch for the young otter Jody as she's taken further and further away from the rescue centre and into the kelp forest. Like otter pups in the wild, she's happy to ride on Mum's stomach, even if Mum's a bit larger than most. Jody's baby buoyancy is gradually wearing off as she grows her first adult coat. Now she's taking the initiative. She doesn't need Mum to guide her down. She heads off into the murk alone. She spots some movement, a crab dashing for cover. She does her best to cling to the wriggling crustacean and bundles it to the surface. She appears to relish her first crab dinner. A landmark success that will bring about a new chapter in Jody's life. The open ocean is a dangerous place to be. Apart from the natural threat of rough seas and hungry predators, sea otters also have to deal with man. At one time, hunting for furs decimated the otter's numbers. Now they are protected by law, but that doesn't stop other fatal human encounters. Pollution is one of the biggest threats to marine life, and the oil industry can take a very heavy toll on the otters. The Pacific coast of North America is dotted with the outlines of oil rigs and exploration vessels. The greatest threat is that of an accident, an oil leak. One of the most famous oil spills of all time was the collapse of the Exxon Valdez, a ship that in 1989 leached 10 million gallons of crude oil into Alaska's pristine waters. Tens of thousands of seabirds and millions of other marine creatures were killed. Sea otters became the spearheads of cleanup efforts. Oiled creatures were collected and cleaned up, but nonetheless, millions of lives were lost, including 6,000 otters. It took many decades for the coastline to recover, but thankfully today the otters have rebuilt their numbers. Now that she's managed to secure a meal for herself, Julie knows it's time to set Jody free. Otters leave their mothers very quickly in the wild, and now it's time for the little orphan to do the same. She arrives on the beach by box. This time, Mum's not dressed for swimming. Jody alone will enter the waves. It's hard for the human carers to say goodbye, but Jody is now back where she belongs, ready to live among the last great rafts of sea otters in the wild. Within days, the little otter has settled into her new home. She dives deep into the kelp in search of food and finds a large and rather prickly target. Sea urchins require careful handling, but she's obviously been paying attention to her surrogate mum. she props the urchin into her armpit for the return journey. It's not easy holding a rock while staying the right way up, and some of the bashing takes place under the water, but she's deftly using the anvil and disarms the urchin's prickly defences. Adult sea otters live segregated lives. Males huddle offshore, females form rafts with their young. But there is another group, the teenage hangout. This is where otters gather after leaving their mothers until they are old enough to breed themselves. Jody will probably meet Felina, as both will join these youth groups for the next few years. And over 1,000 miles to the north, amid the newly forming ice, Otter is doing the same. All three pups have faced the most challenging part of their lives, their first year. There used to be around 300,000 sea otters in the world, but 100 years ago they had been hunted to just 3,000. Though their numbers have recovered, they are still threatened. Otter, Jody, and Felina will soon become vital parts of the breeding population, the future for one of the world's most lovable animals. From three very different backgrounds, crashing ice, rolling surf, and even plastic bathtubs, they have beaten the odds. All faced their own challenges, and all three babies have done it. They are ready to enter the next chapter of the Sea Otter saga.